There are forces working against you right now, and the most dangerous part is this: you do not see them. They are not loud. They do not interrupt your day. They move quietly, shaping your choices while you believe you are acting with control. That is why they win. These enemies do not come from the outside. They operate from within. You wake up with intention. You tell yourself today will be different. You plan, you prepare, you feel that familiar surge of motivation, and then, without warning, something begins to shift beneath the surface. Your pace slows, your focus drifts, your standards soften, and by the end of the day, you are no longer where you intended to be. Not because you lack ability, but because something interfered. Let me ask you something directly. How many times have you promised yourself you would follow through only to quietly break that promise? No dramatic failure, no clear collapse, just a small decision that moved you away from what you said mattered. That is how these enemies operate, not through force, through influence. They disguise themselves as reasonable thoughts, as harmless habits. As patterns you have repeated so often, they feel normal. And because they feel normal, you stop questioning them. They remain unchallenged. You believe you are in control of your life, but control is not defined by intention. It is defined by repetition. If your actions do not align with what you say you want, then something else is guiding you. And that something is often a pattern you have allowed to exist without awareness. This is the gap between desire and behavior, and it is where these enemies live. Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind offers alternatives when you are about to act? A reason to wait, a reason to adjust the plan, a reason to make an exception just this once. That is not random, that is conditioning. Each time you accept that suggestion, you reinforce it. Each time you delay, you make delay easier. And over time, what began as a small habit becomes a fixed response. A response that shapes your future, quietly, consistently, without resistance. This is how progress is lost, not in a single moment, but in a pattern. A pattern of small decisions that seem insignificant in isolation, but when repeated, create a direction that leads you away from what you want. Most men never recognize this. They look outward. They blame circumstance, timing, or opportunity. They search for answers in new strategies, while the real cause remains untouched. That is the danger. What you do not see, you cannot change. And what you do not change continues. These enemies thrive in familiarity. They feel comfortable, predictable, safe. And because they feel safe, they are protected, allowed to continue, without interruption, without correction, without awareness. But safety is not progress. Comfort is not growth. And what feels easy often leads nowhere. Let me be clear. These enemies are not rare. They are common. They exist in your daily routine, in your thinking patterns, in the way you respond to discomfort, in the choices you make when no one is watching. And because they are subtle, they are ignored until their effect becomes visible. By then, time has been spent, opportunities have passed, and the distance between where you are and where you could be has grown larger than it needed to be. But this can be reversed, not by doing more, but by removing what is, weakening you. Because progress is not only built through action, it is preserved through elimination. In this lesson, you will uncover 5 specific enemies that are shaping your future right now. Not obvious ones, but quiet patterns that influence your behavior without demanding your attention. You will begin to see them clearly. You will recognize their presence, and once you recognize them, you gain control. Because awareness breaks repetition, and broken repetition allows change. But you must be willing to look, because these enemies will not present themselves as problems. They will appear as habits, as logic, as routine. And unless you question them, they will remain. So listen carefully, not casually, but deliberately. Because what you are about to uncover is not external, it is internal. And once you identify it, once you remove it, you will realize something most men never do, that your future was not being destroyed by circumstance, but by patterns you were allowing to continue. There is a form of failure that does not announce itself. It does not arrive with force, nor does it present itself as collapse. It comes quietly, so quietly that most men never recognize it until its effect has already shaped their condition. It is not defeat, it is drift. If I were to begin again, I would concern myself first, not with large mistakes, but with small deviations. For it is not the great error that directs a man away from his aim, it is the repeated, unnoticed shift. A man begins with intention. He knows what he desires. He sets a course. Yet as the days pass, something begins to change, not in a single moment, but gradually. His attention moves. His effort weakens slightly. His direction becomes less precise. He does not stop. He continues. But he is no longer aligned. This is drift. And drift, when left uncorrected, becomes direction. Most men do not recognize the moment it begins, for it does not feel like loss. It feels like adjustment, a small delay, a slight change of plan, a decision that appears harmless in isolation. Yet these small adjustments accumulate. Each one moves the man slightly away from where he intended to go. And because the movement is slight, it is ignored. If I were beginning again, I would not ignore these moments. I would observe them closely, for they determine the path more than any single decision. There is also a danger in routine. A man repeats his days. He follows patterns. He moves through familiar actions without examination. And in this repetition, he assumes that he is progressing. Yet repetition without direction does not produce advancement. It produces movement, and movement without aim leads nowhere. If I were beginning again, I would not trust routine alone. I would question it. I would ask whether what I repeat is moving me forward or simply keeping me occupied. There are many men who are active, busy, engaged, yet their position does not change. They do much, but they do not advance. This is the result of drift, effort applied without alignment. If I were beginning again, I would not measure my progress by activity. I would measure it by direction, for direction determines outcome. There is also a gradual dulling that occurs when drift is allowed to continue. A man who once felt clear becomes uncertain. A man who once acted with urgency becomes slower. A man who once held his standard firmly begins to relax it, not intentionally, but gradually. He adjusts, and in adjusting, he lowers. If I were beginning again, I would guard against this lowering, for standards, once reduced, are not easily restored. There is also the illusion of control. A man believes he is choosing his direction. He feels that he is deciding, yet his actions do not reflect his intention. He says one thing, he does another. And because the difference is small at first, he does not question it. Yet this difference grows until the gap between what he intends and what he does becomes wide. This is the effect of drift. If I were beginning again, I would close this gap early, before it widens, before it becomes difficult to correct. There is also the matter of awareness. A man who does not observe himself cannot correct himself. He moves through his day without examining his actions. He repeats without questioning. And in this lack of awareness, drift continues. If I were beginning again, I would develop this awareness deliberately. I would observe my own actions, not harshly, but clearly. I would notice where I move away from my intention, and I would correct it. At once, there is also a contrast that becomes visible over time. The man who allows drift appears inconsistent. He begins strongly, then weakens. He speaks with certainty, then hesitates. He moves forward, then slows. Others may not understand the cause, but they recognize the pattern. They see effort without result, and in time, they lose confidence in his direction. If I were beginning again, I would not allow this pattern to form, for perception follows behavior, and behavior follows alignment. There is also another man, one who does not allow drift. He observes himself. He corrects small deviations. Immediately. He does not wait for misalignment to grow. He adjusts early. And because he adjusts early, his direction remains true. His progress appears steady, not because he avoids error, but because he corrects it quickly. Others see this. They recognize consistency. They recognize control. And in this, they place trust. For a man who maintains direction becomes reliable. If I were beginning again, I would become this man, not through force, but through attention. There is also a principle that must be understood. Direction is not set once, it is maintained daily. A man may decide his aim clearly, yet if he does not maintain alignment, that aim loses influence. His actions begin to diverge, and over time, the aim becomes distant. If I were beginning again, I would not rely upon a single decision. I would reinforce it daily, through action, through correction, through awareness. There is also the compounding effect of drift. A small deviation today becomes a larger deviation tomorrow, and a larger one the day after, until the man finds himself far from where he intended to be. And when he looks back, he cannot identify the moment it occurred, for it did not occur in a moment. It occurred in a pattern. If I were beginning again, I would interrupt this pattern early, for what is corrected early is easily controlled. What is allowed to grow becomes difficult. There is also a final realization. A man does not lose his future in a single failure. He loses it through repeated misalignment, through small decisions that move him away from his aim, through drift that is not corrected. If I were to express this as instruction, I would say, do not drift, observe, correct, remain aligned. Let this be fixed firmly within. I remain directed. I do not move away from my aim without correction. I stay aligned with what I have chosen. Repeat this not as encouragement, but as discipline. For the mind, when trained to observe and correct, reduces drift. And when drift is reduced, direction is preserved. Thus, if I were to begin again from nothing, I would begin here, by eliminating drift. For in eliminating drift, I would maintain direction. And in maintaining direction, I would ensure that my actions, not occasionally, but consistently, lead me toward the result have chosen. Having recognized the danger of drift, the next enemy, if I were to begin again, is more subtle, more immediate, and far more deceptive. It does not appear as distraction from the outside. It arises within. It speaks quietly, and it is rarely questioned. This enemy is inner suggestion. It is the voice that appears at the precise moment you are about to act, not before you decide, not after you finish, but at the exact point where action must occur. And what it offers is not resistance, it offers reason, a reason to wait, a reason to adjust, a reason to make an exception just this once. If I were beginning again, I would learn to recognize this voice at once, for it does not oppose you directly, it persuades you. There is a distinct pattern to its appearance. A man decides, he forms intention, he prepares to act, and at that moment, without warning, a thought appears. It is not forceful, it does not command, it suggests. Begin later, take more time, adjust the plan, do this. Instead, these suggestions feel reasonable. They do not appear as weakness, they appear as logic, and because they appear as logic, they are accepted. If I were beginning again, I would not accept them without examination, for they are not neutral, they are directional. Each suggestion, once accepted, moves the man slightly away from his original decision, and in that movement, his authority weakens. There is also the danger of familiarity. A man hears these suggestions so often that he no longer recognizes them as interference. They feel natural, expected, part of his thinking. And because they feel natural, they are not resisted. They are followed. This is how inner suggestion gains power, not through force, but through repetition. If I were beginning again, I would separate myself from this voice. I would observe it, not identify with it. For the moment a man believes every thought he hears is his own command, he loses control. There is a difference between decision and suggestion. Decision is deliberate, it is chosen, it is clear. Suggestion is immediate, it arises without invitation. It seeks to alter direction. If I were beginning again, I would hold firmly to decision, and I would question suggestion. There is also a pattern of gradual weakening that occurs when suggestion is obeyed repeatedly. A man follows one suggestion, nothing appears to change. He follows another. Still, no visible consequence. Thus he concludes there is no cost. Yet the cost is internal. Each time he accepts suggestion over decision, he reduces the strength of his own command. His decisions become less final, less binding, more negotiable. And what is negotiable is easily changed. If I were beginning again, I would remove this negotiation. I would not permit suggestion to override decision. For the moment decision becomes optional, authority is lost. There are many men who do not fail because they lack ability. They fail because they follow suggestion. They begin, then adjust, then delay, then restart. And in this cycle, they never advance far. Their effort is constant, but their direction is unstable. If I were beginning again, I would not allow this instability. I would act when I decide, without interruption, without reconsideration, unless true necessity demands it. There is also a deeper layer to this enemy. Suggestion often disguises itself as protection. It tells the man to avoid discomfort, to reduce effort, to choose what is easier. And because this appears beneficial, it is followed. Yet what is easier does not strengthen. It maintains or weakens. If I were beginning again, I would not seek ease. I would seek advancement. For advancement requires effort, and suggestion often appears strongest at the moment effort is required. There is also the matter of identity. A man who follows suggestion becomes one who hesitates. He begins to expect interruption. He anticipates adjustment. He no longer trusts his own decisions fully. And in this, he weakens himself. Others begin to see it. They observe that he does not proceed directly, that he changes course, that he delays, and in time, they no longer rely upon his word. If I were beginning again, I would not allow this identity to form. I would act directly, and in acting directly, I would become consistent. There is also another man, one who does not follow suggestion. He hears it, but he does not obey it. He recognizes it as interference, and he proceeds regardless. This man appears different, not because he is louder, but because he is steady. He does not adjust without cause. He does not delay unnecessarily. He acts, and in acting, he advances. Others recognize this. They see decisiveness, they see certainty, and they trust it. If I were beginning again, I would become this man, not by removing suggestion, but by refusing to follow it. There is also a strengthening that occurs. Each time a man ignores suggestion and acts upon decision, he increases his authority. He proves to himself that he is not controlled by passing thought, that he directs himself, and in this his control grows. If I were beginning again, I would build this control deliberately, through repeated action, through refusal to negotiate, through consistency. There is also a final realization. Suggestion does not disappear. It continues. It appears again and again. But its power depends entirely upon response. If it is followed, it strengthens. If it is ignored, it weakens. If I were to express this as instruction, I would say, do not follow every thought. Act on decision. Let this be fixed firmly within. I act on what I have decided. I do not follow passing suggestion. I proceed without interruption. Repeat this, not as encouragement, but as rule. For the mind, when trained to distinguish between decision and suggestion, begins to obey the stronger. And when decision is obeyed, control is established. Thus, if I were to begin again from nothing, having removed drift,